Hello, and welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the ups and downs of the creative process and how to keep it moving. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. I am a writer, singer, improv comedy newbie, science fiction geek, and creativity coach who loves helping right-brained folks get unstuck. I am so excited to be coming to you with interviews and coaching calls to show you the depth and breadth both of creative pursuits and creative people, to give you some insight into their experiences and to inspire you. My guest today is Lela Rohrer Stech, an artist based in New York. Lela's work is playful and fun, and so is she. You'll hear us talk about one painting I could see in the background from a distance, and I've included a photo of that painting in the show notes at fycuriosity.com so you can see it too. In addition to her art, we talk about what she learned from living abroad and how everything we learn somehow manages to come together in a useful way over time. Here's my conversation with Lela. Thank you for talking to me. I'm psyched.
I am really excited to be here.
Good. And we have just discovered that we're both from the same part of the world that people get very confused about. We're both from central Pennsylvania. Actually, does Lancaster count as central Pennsylvania? Or is it more
eastern Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I think York is sort of like, it kind of is, and it kind of is sort of on the line. half of York County is across the line, and half of it isn't, and it's only because the Susquehanna River runs the way it does that York counts.
There you go. I figure we're only 45 minutes to an hour from Philly, so I count as eastern Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Whereas I think of, the closest city to York is Baltimore. So if we were going to go somewhere, that's where we would always go, down to Inner Harbor or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking Harrisburg. That's the first thing that came to mind.
Okay, major city. Harrisburg.
Okay, all right.
Harrisburg is a city, but it's not on the same scale as Philly or Baltimore.
Nowhere near.
So yeah, but we were just saying that, but just because you're from central Pennsylvania and you have Pennsylvania Dutch roots is not the same as being Amish or being Mennonite.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
A common misconception.
Yes. Hi, where are you from? I'm from Lancaster County. Are you Amish? Yeah, no.
Nope. And also, the first way that anyone who's from central Pennsylvania knows that you are not is that you say, "Oh, I'm coming down to visit Lancaster." No, it's Lancaster.
Oh, it's so hard not to go. No, it's Lancaster. I had somebody ask me once, what are the things on chairs? I'm like, pastors. How do you say where you grew up? Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, then it's kisters on the chairs because
yeah.
I'm not changing it. I know how to say it right.
Yeah. I actually worked with a guy a couple of years ago who moved to Lancaster, and a friend of mine at work she's from Elizabethtown, I think. And we looked at each other and we're like, we're going to have to teach him before he goes because they'll all know he's not local.
Oh, yeah. No,
and we did. We walked into his office and we're like, repeat after us, Lancaster, Lancaster. He's like, Lancaster. No, Lancaster.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I love that you guys taught him that. That's critical.
It really is. Because you stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, we roll our eyes like, huh?
Uh-huh.
They're not from here.
Nope. Everybody knows it as soon as they hear you say it.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. That's so good that you taught him that.
Well, we liked him. We wanted him to survive.
Oh my gosh, he's lucky. He's really lucky to have known you guys.
Well, and he's from Iowa, so I'm pretty sure, we looked at him and said, you're going to like that much better than you like New Jersey.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
He probably fit in well.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, because since we've both come from the same part of the world, you paint. How did you start painting? Did people look at you strangely? Because, though Lancaster is artsier than York, I think. Though York's gotten better in recent years. Did that have any influence on how you started up being an artist?
I think, you know what, I'm going to go where a lot of people go. I've always been creative. I like to make things. I like to do things. I remember being a kid and making little books for my Barbies and paintings for their walls. And and it sounds so cliche, but creativity is just always, my mom is super creative. My dad is a farmer. And while I think a lot of people don't realize that farming encompasses so much, I mean, planning, business,
Mm-hmm.
the farming part itself. And so I feel like that's also a very creative thing in a different way. I just had a creative life growing up. I took a lot of art classes in high school, and considered doing art in college, but I had that preconceived notion that, oh, you can't do anything with art. So I think it's just a natural thing for me. It's a way of escape, but not just escape. It's just also a way of expressing myself and my feelings. And I don't feel like it was looked at like, oh, why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
It's just me. It's just part of who I am. And does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. But it's always interesting to me to hear stories about how people started, because sometimes, you're really discouraged as a kid, and sometimes you're really lucky and you have somebody who really encourages you, and whether it's a teacher or a parent, and it influences how you learn and how you grow and how you see yourself.
Oh, for sure. No, I think I've been super blessed in that my parents are both extremely encouraging. I have two younger sisters who are incredible, had great influences with my teachers and, other people, friends of my parents. So other people in my life always felt encouraged in whatever direction I chose to go. And actually, the painting and mixed media really hasn't come into fruition until these last 3 or 4 years. Like, I haven't really
Mm-hmm.
devoted myself to it. It's always been there, but I haven't really devoted myself to it until recently.
So how was it until recently? Were you trying to balance? I mean, you must have been trying to balance with, painting with other work or with family stuff or things like that. Did it influence how you saw yourself as an artist?
Um, I'm going to kind of start back a little bit.
Go
Remember,
for it.
I said I thought about doing the art route in college. Decided against it. I actually ended up doing. I first started with journalism, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. And then I did mass communications, advertising. And once I graduated, I realized, oh yeah, I really don't want to do this either. And by that time, I was married. So I got married young,
Mm-hmm.
right out of college. And we were living in New Hampshire. Job market was really lousy. So I started working as a teacher's aide in the special education department, and realized, oh, I actually really like this. I'm good at it. And so ended up going back to school. And it took a while, but I got my master's in elementary education. And I feel like this is such a long story, but this is
No, it's great.
it's part of how things came to be. So again, and during all this time, we were moving about every 2 years for my husband's work. And so I never really got to, even after I got my master's in elementary education, right after that, we moved to, another location, another state, had to get this certification there. By the time I got that, I was pregnant with our first child. And we had always agreed and that I would stay home with the kids if and when we had them. And it's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for a good part of our childhood. And I really wanted to do that for my own kids. So I never really got to work. outside of the home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was a waitress and a hostess and, that kind of thing.
Right.
And a substitute teacher for quite a while, but I never established a career. Before before having kids. There we go.
Yeah. So did you end up using the stuff that you learned when you got that degree with your own kids?
You know what? I feel like yes, a lot of it.
I would think so.
In a roundabout way. I was talking to a friend last week and I'm like, talking about regrets and, I kind of wish I had done the art school thing. And she actually had done that. And she said, yeah, you know what? You may have done that and you might be feeling the same way. And I said, you know what? Never mind. Because what I did do, I learned a lot from it. I feel like it makes me a better mom, a better friend, a better sister, daughter, because I learned a lot about children and people, how they learn, how they absorb things. So yeah, it was a good thing. Definitely a good thing.
Yeah, I think everything kind of, like writers always say everything is material. And I think that's true way beyond writing.
Absolutely.
Somehow it all filters through and becomes useful.
It does. And I believe a lot of it has to do with perspective too. I could dwell on the fact that, I've never used it, in a formal sense. And yet I choose to look at it like, okay, maybe I haven't used it in a formal sense. And look at all I've gotten out of it regardless. It was an exciting time for me, realizing that I could, learning the things I was learning and very empowering. And so no, it was a very good experience.
So is there, because I can see over your shoulder the paintings behind you, and there's no denying that they look really, really playful. And I don't want to say like something a kid would draw, because they're obviously not, but they're still, they feel inspired by, the kind of thing you might have done when you were a little kid. I can't tell if they're umbrellas or spiders or what they are back there, but I'm intrigued as I'm looking at them. And I'm just wondering if that whole, elementary vibe filters into what you do now. And I think it probably does, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
Those are actually flowers.
Okay. I can't see them very well, in my defense.
No, you really can't. I'm looking at them and I'm like, they could be spiders or umbrellas. You're right. See, that's good. It's actually good to hear things like that, because it opens up things that I might not have been seeing, because I was focused on them being flowers. So I like that.
And I see paper dolls up above you too. At least I think they're paper dolls.
They are. Yeah. I did that one a long time ago.
I haven't thought about paper dolls in a long time.
I might have to do some of those again. Cut. You know how you used to cut them out to make the paper dolls?
Yeah.
That's what that is. Now I forget the question. Oh yes, influencing my art. I did warn you that I squirrel.
It's
and
okay.
I forget where I was.
That's all right. You're human.
Okay. I never thought about it that way, but it probably does have some kind of influence there. When you asked me that question, my first thought was my aunt is an artist. And I've always admired her. And one time I was at her house visiting, and we were talking about art, and she said, just approach it like a child would. And at the time, I didn't understand what she meant. I mean, I don't even remember how old I was, but at the time I didn't understand what she meant. And I just made very childlike drawing, like literally. It wasn't until years later that I understood what she meant. You approach it like a child. You don't think about it. You just let it go, and you let your feelings, your whatever, your mood, you just put it all out there. A lot of times I'll paint with my fingers, just like you would as a child. I wipe it off on my my jeans, or I actually try to keep a cloth by me, but sometimes, so no, I just try to approach it more like a child and not care what it looks like. I mean, yes, I care, but while I'm doing it, let all that go. When I'm at a point where I'm ready to step back, I'll look at it and go, oh, that works. That doesn't. A little bit, but I think, and we haven't touched on this yet, but my husband and I are no longer together. So a lot of what I'm doing now is in response to dealing with that pain. And working my way through that and trying to look at things in a positive way. It's always my goal there is always something positive in everything. And it's my goal to find that. I might not find it right away. And some days the negative feels so incredibly overwhelming. But if I sit with that for a little bit, something positive always comes out of it and comes to me eventually. And I think for me, that's what the art is, finding that positive.
That's amazing and awesome.
Yeah. And actually it's been critical in working my way through that difficulty.
Yeah. I mean, I would think it would have to be, and it's such an outlet, and not even necessarily outlet feels so diminishing a term for what that actually is. It's like, I would think that it would be a great way to explore what's going on in addition to letting stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely. My aunt was interested in a piece of artwork, and she was talking to my mom, and she said, well, I just don't want anything now because I know what Lee, my family calls me Lee, is going through. And I said to my mom, but I try to put the happy, the positive in my art. I'm not quite sure. And I looked back at the stuff she was talking about, that she had looked at, and I'm like, I don't think that looks sad and bummed out to me. I think that looks kind of happy. So maybe her point was that she knew what I was working through to get to that point. But it definitely is a way to work through all of that. And I've found that and I think that's why it's happened over, in the last 4 years that I've really started focusing on my artwork, is that it's an excellent way to work through things. Creativity is incredible that way.
And I'm guessing that, like, my experience with music is very different than my experience with writing. And I just finished singing the Fare Requiem with a choir that's couldn't be easier, literally right down the street from me. 45 minutes a week for like 10 or 12 weeks, and off you go, sing with the orchestra. It's great. And I hadn't done it for a couple of years because I've had some trouble with my voice and I wasn't sure I could get through a rehearsal. And if they're not doing something that, appeals to me, it's great because it's the laziest thing you could possibly do and still call yourself a choral singer. Cause it's like, oh, I feel like singing this one. Nah, I don't feel like singing that. But when I go back, and I was kind of hesitant to go back this time, but I love the Fare Requiem so much that I sat down for that first rehearsal and was, it's like you forget how great it feels. And I forget, I think, how much there's a piece of my soul that needs to do this. And Absolutely. That, there's stuff that comes through and comes out, even though somebody else wrote the music. I know what the notes are going to be. It's not like I'm going to change them from week to week, but they're so gorgeous that I just want to sing them. It just feels really good to sing them. And I think that, that's sort of what I'm hearing a little bit too. It's like, there's this piece of you that needs to be able to do this thing.
Absolutely.
And if you let it go for too long, you forget how much you need it, that there's something in you that comes out through it and feeds off of it. And, we let it go and then we wonder why we're not so happy.
Absolutely. You've said it perfectly. Just like, you said with the singing, yes, you're singing someone else's notes and words, but you're expressing them, and
Mm-hmm.
and I know that feeling. I used to sing in high school with the choir, the chorus, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
and I know that feeling. And now I just sing in my car, and
Yeah, that's important too.
but it feels so good to just belt it out.
Yeah. In a way that doesn't feel that way to me with writing. Writing is a totally different vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you there. I do like to write, but it doesn't have that same.
Yeah, and I'll bet painting feels different to you too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a different. It feels more expressive.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow. Not
sure
why. Oh, maybe it's the physicality of it.
Oh, that could be. And there is a physicality to writing too, even though it's not as obvious. Do you get that sense of, like, every once in a while, if I'm writing, I'll feel kind of like, ooh, I don't know what's going to happen next, but this is really cool and things are coming together and, you're discovering stuff as you go, which is what makes it exciting for me. Is painting like that for you?
First of all, I'm glad you said that about writing, because I had never thought about it that way. So now you've actually given me a little bit more, added a little bit of excitement to my writing.
Oh, good.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
And yes, absolutely with painting. I have a painting in front of me that I'm looking at. I was going to do something totally different with it. And then as I was working on it, I'm like, oh, you know what? I really think this would work well for something else. And now, I was kind of feeling about it, not sure what to do with it. And now I'm excited about it again. So for sure, it works that way. And I'm thinking, I'm looking around my studio. I have a lot of paintings that are partway through.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens to me a lot. I get partway through a painting and then I'm like, not quite sure where to go with this, or it's not going the way I wanted it to. So I'll set it aside and start another one. So a lot gets started. It just takes a while to finish them.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets a little bit frustrating, but I also think it's a good thing because, when I have all these in progress around me, I can look at them and say, oh, you know what? This idea that I have is going to work perfectly for, this or that painting. It's actually pretty exciting.
That's really cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, when you were talking about, looking at painting like a child,
mm-hmm.
I find in my own head that I've got this contrast that I probably wouldn't have had a couple of years ago, because I thought it would have been exactly like what you were saying with, just let it go, just let it all out. But my 6-year-old nephew, who likes to draw, which is no great shock considering that his mother's a painter and his father's an architect. I watched him at either Christmas or Thanksgiving trying to draw something that was in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really doing pretty well. I mean, he's 6 and he draws better than his aunt ever will. So I draw stick figures because that's as far as I ever got.
And that's okay.
But
that's actually
XKCD thrives on stick figures, right? So there must be something to it. But if people don't know what that is, it's a webcomic and it's great. But I watched him and I was blown away because he's 6 years old and I watched him turn himself into a twisted little ball of perfectionism right in front of me. And I thought, wow, it starts that early.
Oh my gosh.
because he couldn't get the one part right. And he got so frustrated. No, it's not good enough. And it's, it doesn't look right. And I'm getting it wrong. And I was just like, oh, honey, don't do this to yourself. You're only 6.
No, no, no,
You
no.
have plenty of time to go through this later, which I hope you never will, except that you're starting early.
Oh yeah, he's starting really early.
He's really early. And I kind of recognize some of that. I think some of it is that whole eldest child thing where you do get hung up on stuff like that. Cause I could kind of feel the recognition in my bones as I was watching him do this to himself, which maybe is why I never progressed past stick figures. But
yeah.
But it's funny because I think, kids get more of that kind of stuff than we think they do. And I'm just curious, especially since you have the elementary ed background, if you have any thoughts on that, or if you've wrestled with perfectionism yourself and what's worked for you.
I absolutely have wrestled with perfectionism. Okay, some of what helped was having kids and having to let go of certain things. Pick your battles is what we parents always say is, pick your battles. But that doesn't just apply to kids. That applies to everything. I can look around my kitchen and dining area and it's a mess, which it frequently is. It is now. Stuff lying everywhere. And I can say, all right, I'd like to clean that up. I'd like to go to the studio. I have to walk the dog and I have to make something to eat, dinner at some point. So I can look at those 4 things and go, all right, well, pick your battles. I can only fit in part of these things. So I have to walk the dog. I have to make something to eat, but that can just come from the freezer too. So between cleaning up and making art, I'm going to pick my battles. I'm going to go make the art because I know that's what's going to make me, that's what's going to fill me up. And the kitchen, the mess is always going to be there. So I can clean it up in the 5 minutes I have here and there. And
right.
It'll happen eventually. So definitely it's a pick your battle kind of thing and do what fills you up. Okay, don't let it go so long that, things grow on the plates, but, it can wait.
I have a friend who says it'll be there. It's not going to go anywhere. It'll wait for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere. But your time is precious. And, I need to do what fills me up. And so if I have a choice, I'm going to choose the thing that fills me up. And that for me is making art and walking my dog. I love that. Spending time with my kids, my family. Although right now I live in New City, New York, and New York State. So I'm not that close to my family, but when I do get to spend time with them, it's always good. My friends.
What about in your art? Have perfectionism been an issue there?
I think a little bit, but I don't do things that are realistic. So it's more of an abstract expression of art. So I don't feel too much perfectionism. I mean, I don't feel like perfectionism is too much of a problem. And then I'm thinking about, oh yeah, but you're trying to get this one spot just right on this thing. So yes, a little bit, but it's not overwhelmingly so. And I have learned to say, okay, nope, good enough. And I might notice it and nobody else probably will. And if they do, okay, I won't make that mistake again.
Yeah, I think good enough is so incredibly important. Like there's an actual skill, maybe even a little bit of a talent in learning to say this is good enough. Absolutely. That we get drilled out of us when we're kids and then we have to learn again.
Absolutely. I think, okay, there's a fine line between, oh, this is good enough and it really is terrible.
Right.
And this is good enough because I've put my all into it. And if I do any more, I'm just overworking it, overdoing it, that it's time to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's more of, instead of this is good enough, okay, it's time to let it go.
Yeah. And that is definitely a real thing too. Because I've had people say to me, how do I know when I'm finished working on my book? And it's like, you'll know, because you just won't be able to do anything else with it anymore. And you're just going to say, this is it. I have done everything with this that I can do. And that doesn't mean that in, a year or 3 or whatever, you're not going to pick up a copy of that book and flip through it and go, oh, I wish I could grab my red pen and edit this sentence or this paragraph, because I've done that. But also, when I was finishing my MFA program, you could do extra semesters, but for obvious reasons, nobody really wanted to do extra semesters unless they felt like they really needed them. And our motto with my class in our last semester was, it doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be good enough to get the diploma.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be good enough to graduate. I will do everything I can to make it as good as I can, but I am not going to kill myself to make this thing perfect. Because as it was so much to just revise an entire book in, 15 weeks is a huge challenge. I literally don't remember most of that last semester because I was just working all the time.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, you have to learn when to just say, this is it. It's as done as it's going to be. I'm going to let it go. Even when you wish for the red pen later. It's
absolutely.
This was as much as I could do with it.
But don't you think that that's also part of that is just experience too?
Mm-hmm.
Like you might know or look at things differently a little bit later and have a different perspective, or just have learned more and say, okay, I might have done that differently, but that's now. At the time, if you've put everything into it, you kind of come to a point where you're where there's nothing left for that particular thing in the moment, and then it's time to let it go. I actually really like that. I'm going to write that down. Let it go instead of it's good enough. I like time to let it go.
Yeah.
So I'm going to write that down so I don't forget I said it. Sometimes I have so much going on in my head, and it could also partly be age, but we're not going to go.
I hear all of that. All of it.
But I'll say things and then I'm like, did I say it, or I'll completely forget I've said it too. But
yeah, but no, that's a good one. I like that a lot.
I like that too. I'm gonna take that perspective too. I think I like looking at things from as positive a perspective as possible. I don't know. It feels better.
Yeah, it does. And it's so easy to forget to do it.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's easy to suck in the negative and just let it overwhelm you. I have lived with depression on and off throughout probably since I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until my mid to late 30s that it was diagnosed as depression, and I've had some pretty severe episodes, not that required hospitalization or anything, but just some really tough ones to get through. And I have found that for me, looking for the positive, and I mean sometimes searching deep for the positive in certain things, really, really helps and keeps me from falling into a depression. I mean, sometimes it's circumstantial and there's not a whole lot
Right.
to do about it, but there have been times where it's just, I guess, my brain chemistry or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
but in those times, I just, even little things, like, oh, the cat who never sits with me sat with me for an hour today. That was such a happy thing. And sometimes that's enough. It's a positive
Yeah.
thing. It's a happy thing. But looking for and finding the positive is huge.
And I feel like as you're talking, I'm looking at the paintings that I can see behind you, and I see that in them.
Thank you.
Like the flowers that look sort of like spider umbrellas from here.
I
they're just,
actually love that.
for people who can't see this, they're just lots of bright colors, and there is something that's really childlike and awesome in there too. And I am seeing this from a distance, so I'm not getting the details, but they just make me smile. They really do. I really like that one. I keep looking at it over your shoulder.
Yes. I'm looking at like, what is back there? There's a tree up there too.
Yeah.
But thank you. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
I'm really, that's a huge compliment that you can see that and feel that.
Yeah.
That I'm getting that across.
Totally can.
What am I trying to say? That's a huge compliment. So thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm curious, because I know that you spent some time in different places around the world.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, in particular, you were in Moscow for a while. What was that like as an artist and as an American in Moscow, and, whatever else filters in there? So curious.
Okay. We were in Moscow for almost 7 years. And before that, 1 year in Egypt. I absolutely loved our year in Egypt. The kids were still little. My son was in preschool, my daughter in second grade. It's a warm, friendly country. It just felt alive there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the opportunity came up to move to Russia. So we took it. And that was a more difficult adjustment.
I would think.
The people are much more closed off. There's definitely truth to warmer climates,
Mm-hmm.
friendlier people, colder climates, less friendly people. I mean, there's something to that. And also Russia's history.
Mm-hmm.
The people are more closed off at first. It takes time. And once you get to know them and they trust you, they become more friendly. I mean, Russians can be the most open, warm people. They just have to know you and trust you first. And if you look at their history, you can understand that.
Oh, absolutely.
I was talking to my mom and my sisters. We have this WhatsApp chat. So we go back and forth. And I said, people always are fascinated by Russia and Egypt. And they're like, oh, what was it like to live there? And I'm like, well, I know it was special and unique. But for me, it was, I still brush my teeth. I still go grocery shopping. I still raise my kids. I still make dinner. I still do all the normal things. So for me, it was life. Just, on a different scale.
I can relate to that. I spent 6 months in Northern Ireland a little more than 20 years ago, and I was a nanny, with 5 kids. So that's pretty much what I did. I went to the grocery store. I took kids to school. All of that. But at the same time, it's also like, I might not ever get to do this again. So what else am I going to do while I'm here? And all of that. I definitely went in no small part to spend some time in a different culture. So, but yeah, you're right. It is, I'm brushing my teeth, I'm vacuuming the floor, I'm, all of this stuff, but I've got really cool friends and,
Exactly. So I sometimes find it difficult I know it was special, and I am so thankful for those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And it was absolutely unique. And there's part of me, there will probably always be part of me that misses it like crazy. No, it wasn't always easy. I'm not great at languages, and you didn't really need to learn much Arabic because someone always spoke English there. You could always find someone who spoke enough English to speak easily with. Russia was a different case. From what I learned, a lot of people were taught English, during communism, but they weren't allowed to speak it. They needed to know it in case the government wanted them to do something that required English, but they didn't want them speaking it. So people wouldn't speak English, and I was not so good at learning Russian. So I just kind of learned to get by with hand motions and laughing a lot at myself. I would laugh with them as they laughed at me, because I must have looked ridiculous when I need this, and trying to make all these hand motions to get my idea across, and yeah, they would just laugh at me, and yeah, we got it figured out. So I chose to laugh with them. And on the days when I knew I couldn't laugh, I wouldn't go out. And I did have that choice. So yeah. I was fortunate to be able to do that. We lived in an expatriate community, so most everybody in that community spoke English. What was great about that community was we met people from all over the world, and the kids were in the international school, so they also had classmates who were from all over the world. It was just such a filling experience overall. Yes, there were some extremely difficult times, but when I look back at it, it was such a growing and enriching part of my life. And for my kids too. They both are very thankful for it.
Did they pick up much Russian?
No, they seem to have inherited my language ability and not their dad's.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer.
Wow.
They know a little bit, but I'm not sure how much they remember. My son still knows how to swear in Russian.
Of course.
Yeah, because that's the first thing you learn.
Right.
I think they'd probably be able to understand a little bit. Speaking it, and they've both said speaking it is the hard part. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a bummer. It really is. Part of that's being in an American school. It was right. It was. It's the Anglo-American School of Moscow, and it's run by the British, Canadian, and U.S. embassies. So everything's taught in English.
Right. So then they weren't as exposed to it as they might have been otherwise.
No, and they did take Russian classes, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. Yeah.
No. Once my daughter was older and taking the metro places on her own with her friends, she had to speak more Russian, which was great. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Just, let me know where you are, what you're doing.
Right.
But go ahead, take the metro and have fun and speak Russian, read Russian.
I mean, if you're going to be there, that's what you ought to be doing. Absolutely.
For sure. I think I learned a lot about myself, and I've absolutely become a more accepting person of people's differences and the challenges that we face. And also more accepting and forgiving of myself.
That's huge.
That is huge. Less of a perfectionist.
Yeah. But, I mean, it sounds awful to say that, it sounds like you were forced to learn how to laugh at yourself, because force and laughing feel like such opposite things. But that also feels like it's such a gift too, because so many people can't laugh at themselves at all.
Absolutely. I'm not saying it wasn't embarrassing.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, I refused to get my car washed in Moscow because I had a bad experience. At the car wash, the lady just made me feel so stupid. And I'm like, I don't understand you. And I think she was, now looking back at it, I think she was just frustrated because she couldn't get her point across. I couldn't get my point across. I left without washing my car. I was actually, a lot of expats in Moscow, at least when I was there, didn't do their own driving. But my husband was in the auto industry, working for an automaker, and we were both like, no, I want to drive. We both wanted to drive. So anyway, I'm glad I did, but I just always had dirty cars. I'm like, that's it. I'm not washing my cars ever again, which isn't entirely true, but I just put it off as long as possible.
I can understand that.
That one really sticks in my mind. So I'm not saying that it wasn't hard, but after a while, I learned to laugh along. There is some truth. My dad always used to say, laugh and the world laughs with you, cry and you cry alone. And oh my gosh, that made me so angry. And there's some truth to it. There's really some truth to it. You don't have to cry alone. I mean, that's a bit harsh, but but if I get so upset because they're laughing at me, I'm just going to be miserable. So instead, look at it from their point of view and realize, okay, it is kind of funny that the woman can't get her point across because she can't speak Russian.
There's a certain absurdity to it. And that's the funny part.
Absolutely. And I still laugh. I'm picturing myself in certain situations. I mean, it's funny. They should have laughed at me.
And let's face it, even when you do speak the same language, we're not always good at communicating the same ideas to each other.
Absolutely.
It's just harder to see because you understand the words and you think you understand what the person's saying, and then you find out later that they meant something completely different.
You're so right. And there's no point getting all upset over it. Just
it's like, oh, that's not what I got. Okay, now I understand. That's funny.
Try that again. Yeah. Take 2.
Sometimes I feel like it's more like take 37, but
Well, I was actually thinking that when I said take 2 and 3 and 4 and
let's stop counting now.
Sometimes when my sister and I are walking and we're going up a hill and I'm like ready to quit, she's like, not stopping. And I'm like, I actually say that to myself a lot when I get frustrated, not stopping.
Yeah. Some things are more important than frustration.
Absolutely.
Or fear.
Without a doubt, we can get so caught up in it that we freeze.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I don't deal with that because
me either.
Because I do. And I think, that's part of what's taken me so long to embrace the fact that I am an artist and I need to be an artist and express myself through the mixed media art. But it's fear and doubt. And I let it keep me from doing what I need to do, what I love to do.
Yeah, it's a challenge for everybody. So, And it's easy to fall into it and not realize that you've fallen into it.
Yes. You're right. And I think, well, maybe going through the depression and then having, different therapists through the years and learning to talk about, learning to talk about my feelings, my thoughts, and just lost my train of thought again.
That's okay.
Oh, I think it helps you. See, sometimes it helps to say I got lost.
Yeah.
I think it helps you to be more self-aware, and to learn what works for you and what doesn't.
And I think what you just said, how you just said that is really important. It's what works for you. Things that work for somebody else might not work for you, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
And expecting everything to be one size fits all is part of what just keeps everybody stuck.
You are so right. You are so right.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've had one heck of an interesting journey.
Without a doubt.
And you've learned an awful lot along the way. It's really cool.
Absolutely. And I'm so thankful for it. I'm sitting here, I'm like, I grew up on a farm. I feel like my parents are very progressive, and gave me tons of opportunities. I grew up on a farm, wanted to get away from that farm, wanted to travel the world. And that's what I got.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would say, while in that experience, careful what you wish for.
Never quite what you think it's going to be.
No, it really isn't. And while living overseas sounds very exotic, and it is in many ways, it's also a challenge. Because there are parts of it that are very different. And I wouldn't change any of it. Even for all the difficult times, I wouldn't change any of it, because it's just been it's been so fascinating, so enriching. So I just feel like I've grown so much.
Yeah, you wouldn't be who you are now if you changed any of it.
Without a doubt. And I can't change it. So
right.
I think we forget that too sometimes. You can't change it. So be happy for what it is and what it was and what you got out of it. I'm just thankful I don't want to change it. Makes it even better. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like a good place to end. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I feel like I should. Lela was really, really nervous about doing this interview. And
okay.
And she's done fabulously, and she's still here, and she hasn't spontaneously combusted. And I think that's awesome.
Not yet. Although my hands were flying a few times.
That's okay.
Trying to get it all out. No, Nancy, you're right. I was nervous, but honestly, you make it so easy. So thank you.
I try.
You tried to tell me. It's just like we're having a conversation. I'm like, but oh my gosh, I don't like to talk about myself. And
if I wanted to make it hard, I'd hang a picture of all sorts of people staring at you right behind my head, right? But they're not there.
Yeah, no, that would be tough. Oh my gosh, forget about it.
I mean, I'm in my closet with my jackets. This is as low key as it gets.
Oh my gosh. Thank goodness. No, you're awesome.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
This is fun.
Been a lot of fun.
That's it for this week. Many thanks to Lela and to you for joining me. Don't forget to check out the show notes at fycuriosity.com, where you can see the painting we talked about and find links to Lela's site and social media accounts where you can see even more. You can find show notes, the 6 creative beliefs that are screwing you up, and more at fycuriosity.com. I'd also love for you to join the conversation on Instagram. You'll find me at fycuriosity. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. See you next time.